I want you to close your eyes for just a second. Imagine you are standing on a dusty, sun-baked ridge in Pallava. It's just a stone's throw from the bustling chaos of modern-day Chennai.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right, so you look down at the red earth, and you pick up a stone. It is heavy, it's made of quartzite, and it's chipped into this rough teardrop shape. It is a hand axe. It feels primitive and raw. You can almost feel the calluses on the hand that made it hundreds of thousands of years ago.
It's a completely visceral connection to the past, isn't it? Holding something that incredibly old.
It really is. But now I want you to snap your fingers and open your eyes. Fast forward. You're standing in the exact same region, maybe just a few miles away. But now you are looking at a sleek digital dashboard in a high-tech manufacturing hub.
That is quite the jump.
Exactly. You are looking at a roadmap projecting a $1 trillion economy by 2030. You see automated assembly lines and global shipping logistics and high-speed data.
It really feels like you are looking at two entirely different planets. Or, I mean, two different species even.
Yes, it feels like two ends of a spectrum that shouldn't even be touching. But here is the hook for today's deep dive. In this specific slice of the Indian peninsula Tamil Nadu, those 2 points are not just connected. They are part of the exact same story.
And not just in a vague kind of way, right?
Right. I don't mean that in a vague history happens everywhere kind of way. I mean we are tracing a distinct unbroken line.
That is, that's really the perfect way to frame it. Usually when we look at ancient civilizations, we see these distinct breaks. A civilization rises and it collapses, and then the desert sands cover it up. And something entirely new takes its place centuries later.
Like in Mesopotamia.
Exactly like Mesopotamia or parts of Europe. But Tamil Nadu is different. It is fundamentally a story of continuity.
Continuity. That is absolutely the word of the day. Today, we are on a massive mission for this deep dive. We're going to unpack what some scholars call the chronological hegemony of Tamil Nadu.
Which is a heavy term, but it fits perfectly.
It does. We are going to travel from prehistoric hunter-gatherers to the classical heights of the Sangam Age. We'll wade through a very controversial so-called Dark Age. We'll witness an architectural explosion under the Pallavas, and finally we'll land right in the middle of a modern economic survey targeting the fiscal year 2030 to 2031.
And the stack of sources we have to get us there is honestly intimidating. We aren't just summarizing a textbook here today.
Far from it.
We have archaeological reports from the Paleolithic era. We have the classical Sangam poetry anthologies and historical records on dynasties like the Pallavas and Kalabhras. We've got colonial history records and literally the latest 2025-2026 economic survey of Tamil Nadu.
It's a wildly diverse stack. We've got Robert Bruce Foote's geological notes from the 1860s sitting right next to the latest findings from Kilati, which frankly are rewriting the history books as we speak.
They really are. Kilati is the linchpin that is forcing everyone to rethink the timeline of literacy and urbanization in South India. It's the kind of discovery that makes historians sweat a little bit because it entirely challenges the established narrative.
We will definitely get to Pilati, and trust me, we are going to spend some serious time there because the implications for you and for how we understand Indian history are just wild. But we have to respect the chronology first. We have to start at the very, very beginning.
The dawn of habitation.
Exactly, the dawn of habitation. To understand the beginning here, you have to transport yourself back to the year 1863.
Right, so the American Civil War is raging across the ocean. The London Underground is just opening its first line. And in India, under the British Raj, you have this geologist named Robert Bruce Foote walking around a ballast pit in Pallava.
And this isn't just a casual stroll. He's a geologist. He is looking at the ground differently than everyone else. Most people see dirt, but he sees strata.
Precisely. And he spots a stone tool, a hand axe. Now, up until that exact moment, the prevailing view among European scholars was that the Indian subcontinent didn't really have a significant Stone Age history that was comparable to Europe or Africa.
They just thought humans arrived there much later.
Right. But Foote picks up this quartzite implement and realizes, wait a minute, humans, or at least human ancestors, were actually here. And not just recently either. We are talking about deep, deep time.
That discovery at Pallavaram essentially birthed the entire field of prehistory in India, right? It put India on the map of human evolution.
It absolutely did. It was the inception moment. And subsequent excavations at places like Attimrampakam and the Coralair Valley have pushed that timeline back even further. We aren't talking about a few thousand years here.
What's the timeline we're looking at?
The evidence suggests that human-like populations existed in this region around 300,000 years before Homo sapiens even arrived in the area.
Hold on, let's pause on that number. 300,000 years. That puts us squarely in the realm of archaic humans. Are we talking about Homo heidelbergensis or
Yeah.
maybe early Homo erectus?
Likely archaic hominins that were similar to Homo heidelbergensis. They were actively adapting to the diverse ecological zones of the southern peninsula. They were fashioning these crude and rough implements out of very hard rocks like quartzite just to hunt and process food.
It completely shifts the perspective of the region from a settled later zone to an actual cradle of early habitation.
It really does. And there is a specific find in the Vilupuram district that makes this incredibly personal. Usually, when we talk about the Stone Age, we just talk about stones, right? Tools. But there was a discovery that wasn't stone.
You're talking about the baby brain.
Yes, the baby brain.
That phrase alone gives me chills. Baby brain. It just sounds so incredibly fragile.
It is deeply affecting. It's a fossilized infant skull that is estimated to be between 187,000 and 200,000 years old. Now, you really have to understand finding human skeletal remains from that era in South Asia is exceptionally rare.
Because of the environment, right?
Exactly. The climate is tropical and humid and acidic. It destroys bone. It grinds organic matter to absolute dust over millennia. But this specific fossil survived.
It gives us a tangible biological connection to that era.
It does. It proves this wasn't just a transit corridor that people walked through to get somewhere else. It was a place where they lived, where they raised their families, where they mourned their dead. That child lived and died in Tamil Nadu nearly 200,000 years ago. That anchors the human story right in the soil.
So we have this massive silent stretch of the old Stone Age. People living and hunting and surviving. But eventually the technology shifts. We start just chipping rocks and we start polishing them. We start farming.
That is the Neolithic shift. It happens roughly around 2500 BCE. This is the big transition from hunting and gathering to domestication and agriculture. We start to see polished tools and the emergence of pottery.
But if we were looking for the accelerator, the era that really sets the stage for the classical civilization, we need to look at the Iron Age or the megalithic period.
Right, this is roughly 1000 BCE to 300 BCE. And megalithic literally means big stone. Mega meaning big and lithic meaning stone. Similar to Stonehenge, but primarily focused on burial practices.
And the defining feature here isn't just the stones, but the culture surrounding death and the introduction of iron technology.
Yes, this is where we see the black and red ware pottery, which is the absolute hallmark of this era across South India. And the most significant site here that we have to talk about is Adikanallur. It's down south on the banks of the Thamira-Bharani River.
Adikanallur is fascinating because it's not just a graveyard, it's a massive complex.
It is an enormous burial complex.
Yeah.
And the excavations there, some of which actually date back to the colonial era but have continued recently, have yielded bronze utensils and gold ornaments and very sophisticated iron weapons.
Which tells us what exactly about their society?
Well, it tells us they had mastered metallurgy for one. Iron is much harder to work than bronze. It requires significantly higher temperatures. But socially speaking, it tells us a lot. You do not bury people with gold diadems and ornaments unless there is a surplus economy and a distinct class structure.
It implies a hierarchy.
Precisely. You have leaders and warriors and artisans, and there is a very specific detail found in these burials that connects directly to modern culture in the region.
The hooks. I read about this in the source notes.
The alagu, or the hooks, iron hooks found directly in the burials. Now, if you go to a temple festival in Tamil Nadu today, specifically for the god Murugan, you will see devotees piercing their skin with similar hooks as an act of penance or extreme devotion. It's called Kavadi Attam.
And we found similar hooks in Iron Age burials from 3,000 years ago.
Yes, we did. It strongly suggests that certain religious practices, perhaps the concept of painful offering or piercing rituals, might have roots stretching all the way back to the Iron Age.
There is that continuity word again.
Yeah.
We are talking about a ritual practice potentially surviving for 3 millennia. That is older than the Roman Empire. That's older than Christianity.
Exactly. It seamlessly connects the prehistoric mind to the modern devotee you'd see on the street today. But if Adichanallur gives us the ritual depth, the real shock to the system, the thing that is rewriting the textbooks as we speak, is Kiladi.
Kiladi. This is the absolute superstar of modern Indian archaeology right now. It's in the Sivagang district, right on the banks of the Vaigai River. Why is everyone so completely obsessed with Kiladi? I feel like I see headlines about it constantly.
Because it directly challenges the north-south narrative of urbanization in India. For the longest time, the historical consensus was that the second urbanization of India, meaning the rise of cities after the Indus Valley civilization collapsed, happened primarily in the Gangetic Plains up in the north.
While the South was just what? Pastoral.
Yes, the South was seen as pastoral or tribal, maybe a bit backward until much later, perhaps, until the Mauryan influence came down from the north.
And Keelty says, not so fast.
Keelty says we were building cities too. The findings there have pushed the trend line of the Sangam Age urbanism back to roughly 800 BCE. That is centuries earlier than previously thought. And it is not just the date that's impressive, it's the sophistication. They have found over 18,000 artifacts there.
18,000. We are talking about an industrial hub, right? This isn't just a few mud huts.
Absolutely not. We see dyeing vats and spindle whorls and complex weaving tools. This wasn't a village, it was a major production center. They found distinct brick structures and rinwells and very complex closed drainage systems.
That implies serious municipal planning.
It does, but they also found dice and hopscotch pieces made of terracotta.
Which implies leisure time. You know you don't sit around playing hopscotch if you're starving or fighting for survival every minute of the day.
Correct. Leisure requires a surplus economy. People have time to play when their basic needs are easily met. But the real bombshell from Keelty, the absolute game changer, is the literacy aspect.
The graffiti on the pots.
Yes, they found over 120 potsherds with Tamil Brahmi inscriptions. Now, why is this so important? In many ancient civilizations, writing is strictly reserved for the elite, the priests or the court scribes or the tax collectors. It is found on massive monuments or royal seals.
But here it's literally on a cooking pot.
Exactly. It's on the everyday dinnerware. It's names like Adhan or Kuviran scratched casually onto common pottery. This strongly suggests that literacy wasn't just for the 1%. It was widespread. It was accessible to the common person.
That is a highly democratic form of literacy that is very, very rare for that time period. It means the potter knew how to write his name, or the person buying the pot did.
Yes. And there is a controversial or, let's say, provocative angle to this script as well that the sources touch on, the potential link to the Indus Valley.
Oh, right. So let's look at the timeline for a second. We have the Indus Valley civilization collapsing around 1900 BCE, and then we have Keelty rising around 800 BCE. There's a 1,000-year gap there.
A dark millennium, essentially. But if
Yeah.
this link is solidified, and we should note it is still a subject of intense research and debate right now, it bridges that massive cultural gap. Some of the graffiti symbols found at Keelty bear a striking resemblance to the still undeciphered Indus Valley script. It suggests that after the decline of the Indus cities, there might have been a southward movement that carried those cultural seeds, the symbols and the urban planning concepts, down to the banks of the Vaigai River.
That would mean the roots of this southern civilization are directly connected to the Harappan legacy. That changes the entire map of Indian history.
It does. It implies a pan-Indian cultural continuity that predates the Vedic Sanskrit influence. It basically validates the antiquity of the Tamil culture in a way that mythology never really could. Archaeology is finally providing the hard proof.
So Keelty really sets the stage. We have cities and we have writing and we have industry. This flows very naturally into what we call the classical age, the Sangam era.
Roughly 300 BCE to 300 CE. This is widely considered the Augustan age of Tamil culture. And the word Sangam itself is fascinating. It refers to an academy or an assembly of scholars and poets.
And the legend is that there were 3 Sangams, right?
Yes. The tradition, as it's recorded in much later commentaries, says there were 3 Sangams. The first was at then Madurai, which means South Madurai, and the second was at Kalabhra. Both of these were supposedly swallowed by the sea in massive deluges or tsunamis.
Which sounds a lot like Atlantis. But considering the coastline changes and rising sea levels over millennia, it might actually have a kernel of geological truth to it.
Precisely. The Lost Lemuria or Kumari Kandam theories stem directly from this mythological memory of land loss. But historically speaking, what we actually have in hand is the literature from the Third Sangam, which was located in modern Madurai.
And this is the era of the 3 crowned kings, the Moovendar, the Cheras, the Cholas, and the Pandyas. And these aren't just local warlords. These are established dynasties with distinct geopolitics.
Distinct is the right word. Let's break them down from the sources. First, you have the Cheras ruling the west coast. That is modern Kerala and western Tamil Nadu. Their capital was Vengi.
They were the masters of the Arabian sea trade.
Yes, their ports, like Musiri and Thandi, were absolutely bustling with Romans and Greeks and Arabs. They effectively controlled the lucrative pepper trade. The most famous ruler is Charan Senguttuvan.
Is he the one who marched north?
The very same. The legend in the epic Silapathicarum says he led a massive military expedition all the way to the Himalayas to fetch a stone.
A stone for what exactly?
Yeah.
Just to say he did it.
To carve the idol of Kannagi, the heroine of the epic. He wanted to carve her statue from the holiest mountains. It's a massive statement of power. He's saying, my reach extends from the Southern Ocean all the way to the northern peaks. It is political theater at its absolute finest.
That is incredible. Then you have the Cholas in the Kaveri Delta.
The Cholas are the agrarian powerhouse of the three. Their capital was Urayur, and their main port was Kaveri-Pumpatnam, which is also known as Pumpuhar. Their royal symbol was the tiger, and the standout king here is Karikalan.
Karikalan the Great. He's known as an engineer king, right?
He is. He's credited with building the Kalani or the Grand Anicut across the Kaveri River. It is literally one of the oldest water diversion structures in the entire world that is still in use today.
Still in use. That's wild.
Yes. He realized that the Kaveri was flooding constantly and wasting water, so he built a dam to divert it into irrigation canals. He turned the delta into the rice bowl of the south. That stable economic base is what allowed the Cholas to become a massive naval empire much later on.
And finally, the Pandyas.
The Pandyas ruled from Madurai in the south with the fish as their symbol. They were the great cultural patrons. If the Cholas were about agriculture and the Cheras were about sea trade, the Pandyas banked on pearls and poetry. King Nadunchejian is the big name here. He's the victor of the Battle of Talayalanganam.
I just love that name. Talayalanganam. It sounds momentous.
It was a huge deal. He defeated a confederacy of the other two kings and 5 minor chieftains when he was just a young man. But what makes this entire era so special isn't just the wars. It is the literature. The Etuthogai, which is the 8 anthologies, and the Patupatu, the 10 idols.
And of course, the grammar text, the Tolkappiyam.
Which acts as the foundational code for the language itself. But the poetry is incredibly human. It's cleanly categorized into Akam and Puram.
Akam being the inner life.
Yes, Akam is love and intimacy and psychology. It purposely doesn't name names. It is about the hero and the heroine in very specific landscapes, the mountains, the forests, the seashore. It deals with the subtle nuance of human emotion. Puram, on the other hand, is the outer life. War and ethics and kingly duties. It names real kings and real battles.
What really strikes me about all this from the sources is how secular it feels compared to later periods in Indian history.
It is remarkably secular. While kings did perform Vedic sacrifices and people worshipped deities like Murugan or Korvai, the literature itself isn't scripture in the way the Vedas are. It's about life. It's about dharma or ethics, and it's about trade. We were trading extensively with the Roman Empire, the people they called the Yavanas.
We find Roman coins all over Tamil Nadu, don't we?
Hordes of them. Coins of Augustus and Tiberius and Nero. The balance of trade was actually so heavily in favor of Tamil Nadu because they were exporting pepper and pearls and gemstones and fine textiles that Roman senators actually complained in Rome about their gold draining away to India.
That's hilarious.
It was a very cosmopolitan, outward-looking society. You literally had Roman wine being drunk in Tamil royal courts.
But then the record gets a bit fuzzy. Around 300 CE, the lights seemingly go out. Or at least that is the traditional narrative, right? The Kalabhra Interregnum.
The Dark Age. This is undoubtedly the most debated 300 years in South Indian history, from roughly 300 CE to 600 CE. The traditional Moovendar dynasties we just talked about were overthrown by a group called the Kalabhras.
And who exactly were the Kalabhras? The later sources seem to really hate them.
They really do. Later inscriptions, particularly from the Pandya revival period, describe them as Kali Arasar, or evil kings. They heavily imply they were barbarians who completely upset the established social order. Historians debate their origins constantly. Some say they were hill tribes, while others say they came from the Karnataka region, possibly associated with the Kalabhra chieftains.
But why were they called evil? Was it just a case of historical propaganda by the winners?
It was very likely religious and class resentment. You see, the Kalabhras appear to have patronized Buddhism and Jainism quite heavily, and perhaps at the direct expense of the Brahminical order. The Velvikudi copper plates, which are a much later historical source, specifically complain that the Kalabhras confiscated land grants that had been previously given to Brahmins by earlier kings.
So when we say Dark Age, it really just means Dark Age for the people who wrote the history later.
Precisely, because when you look at the actual cultural output of this time, it wasn't dark at all. In fact, it was a massive literary boom.
The Tirukkural was written around this time, right?
Most likely composed during this exact period, yes. The Tirukkural is arguably one of the greatest works of ethics ever written anywhere. It's universal and secular and profoundly deep. If that is a product of a dark age, then we frankly need more dark ages. The great epics Silapathikaram and Manimekalai also likely date to this post-Sangam window.
And Manimekalai is an explicitly Buddhist text, isn't it?
It is. It's essentially a Buddhist philosophical text cleverly disguised as a narrative epic. So this era actually saw a huge flourishing of logic and ethics and narrative literature. It also saw the evolution of the script itself. The Vedasuthu script emerged during this time, and Sanskrit and Prakrit influences increased significantly.
So it wasn't a blackout at all. It was more of a chrysalis phase, a major transition.
That's a great way to put it. But eventually the chrysalis bursts. The Kalabhras are defeated by a revived Pandya line under Kadungan and the rising power of the Pallavas under Simhavishnu. And we enter the era of the Pallava Empire. And this is where Tamil Nadu starts looking like the tourist brochures we know today. The massive stone temples.
The Pallava era, roughly 600 to 900 CE. This is an architectural revolution. Before this, temples were mostly made of wood or brick or metal, which are perishable materials. The Pallavas ruling from Kanchipuram basically made the conscious decision to build for eternity.
Build something that time can't eat.
Exactly. And you can see the evolution of their style so clearly in the archaeology. It starts with Mahendravarman I. He was a truly fascinating character. He was a king, but also a poet and a playwright. He pioneered the rock-cut cave temples.
He has that famous inscription, right?
Yes, at Mandagapattu. He famously declared in an inscription that he built a temple for Brahma, Ishvara, and Vishnu without using any bricks or timber or metal or mortar.
Just pure rock.
Pure excavation into the hillside. Then his son, Narasimhavarman I, who's also known as Malmala, or the great wrestler, takes it a massive step further. He creates the monolithic rathas at Mahabalipuram.
The 5 rathas. These things look like freestanding buildings, but they're actually carved out of a single massive boulder.
Top-down carving. It is essentially sculpture done on an architectural scale, and he is also responsible for the penance of Arjuna, or the descent of the Ganges. That massive open-air bas-relief carving. It's a huge canvas of stone just filled with elephants and gods and sages, and my absolute favorite part, a cat mimicking a sage to trick some mice.
Yes, I love that detail. Wait, there is a hypocritical cat carved into a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
There is. It adds such a wonderful touch of humor and humanity to this otherwise incredibly divine scene. And then finally we get to the structural temples.
Under Rajasima.
Yes. The shore temple at Mahabalipuram, which stands right up against the waves, and the Kailasanathar temple in Kanchipuram. These aren't carved out of existing rock. They are actually built stone by stone. This sets the definitive template for the towering Dravidian Vimanas and Gopurams that the Cholas would later scale up to massive heights.
But the Pallava era wasn't just about stones and buildings. There was a massive vibe shift in religion, too. The Bhakti Movement.
This is absolutely crucial to understand. The Bhakti Movement was essentially a social reformation, disguised as religious fervor. It shifted religion away from the rigid rituals of the Vedas or the intellectual austerity of Jainism and Buddhism. It moved toward intense emotional personal devotion to Shiva and Vishnu.
And the leaders of this movement weren't remote priests speaking Sanskrit?
No, they were the Nayanmars for the Saivites and the Alvars for the Vaishnavites. They were poet saints. And they came from literally all backgrounds. We had kings and hunters and washermen and women all leading the spiritual charge.
That is the democratization aspect of it.
Exactly. They composed incredibly beautiful hymns in Tamil, the Tevaram and the Divya Prabandham. They made the divine accessible to the masses in their own tongue. They traveled constantly from temple to temple just singing. This effectively created a sacred geography of Tamil Nadu that still exists today. It cemented the temple as the absolute center of social and economic and cultural life.
So we have this massive peak in culture and architecture. The Pallavas eventually fall and the Cholas rise again. The imperial Cholas like Rajaraja and Rajendra, who we should definitely note, took this exact template and built a maritime empire all the way across Southeast Asia. But for the sake of our timeline today, let's fast forward to the next major disruption. The arrival of the Europeans.
Colonial encounter. It begins innocuously enough right on the Coromandel coast. In 1639, the British East India Company is just looking for a tiny foothold. They purchase a small strip of land from a local chieftain named Damarla Venkatadri Nayaka.
And that tiny strip of sand becomes Madras, modern-day Chennai.
It becomes the headquarters of the massive Madras presidency.
Yeah.
But here's something the standard history books often gloss over entirely. When we talk about Indian independence, we usually start the clock at 1857. the Sepoy Mutiny in the north.
Right, Mongol, Pandy, and all that. That's what is in all the movies.
Exactly, but Tamil Nadu was fighting back decades before that ever happened.
Polygars.
The Palayakars, or Polygars, these were powerful feudal chieftains who flatly refused to accept British sovereignty or their tax collection methods. You have figures like Puli Favar in the 1750s, and the most famous, of course, is Veerapandiya Kattabomman.
His legendary retort to the British collector Colin Jackson is still quoted all the time today. Do you see the sky? Does it rain on you? Why should I pay you tax?
Do the clouds rain on you?
Yeah.
It's such a powerful assertion of indigenous sovereignty. He was hanged, of course, but the resistance didn't die with him. The Mrudu brothers continued the fight. In 1801, they issued the Tiruchirappalli Proclamation. It was a massive call to arms for a united front, Muslims and Hindus and everyone together against the white Ferengis, as they called them.
And then there is the Vellore Mutiny in 1806. This is a full 50 years before the Northern Rebellion in 1857.
It was a bloody and violent uprising inside the Vellore fort. The main trigger was the Agnew turban. The British basically introduced a new military dress code that forced the Indian sepoys to shave their beards and wear a hat that featured a leather cockade, which deeply offended both Hindu and Muslim religious sensibilities.
They seized the fort and killed British officers and even raised the flag of the Mysore Sultanate right because Tipu Sultan's sons were being held captive there.
They did. It was brutally crushed eventually, but it shook the British establishment to its absolute core. It proved that serious armed resistance was brewing early in the South.
Moving into the 20th century, the resistance gets much more organized. We see the Swadeshi movement take off, and we really have to talk about V.O. Chidambaram Pillai, or VOC as he's known.
The Kapilatiya Tamizon, the Tamil helmsman. His resistance was very unique because it was strictly economic. He realized that the true power of the British lay in their maritime trade monopoly. So he started the Swadeshi Steam Navigation Company to compete directly with the British shipping lines.
That is incredibly bold. Starting a startup to fight an empire.
It was literal economic warfare, and the British destroyed him for it. They jailed him and subjected him to hard labor. They made him pull a heavy oil press like a bullock in prison. But the symbol of his defiance remained. Alongside him, you had the fiery poetry of Subramania Bharathi, who used the Tamil language itself to ignite the freedom struggle.
But simultaneously, there is a very unique political evolution happening in Tamil Nadu that is quite different from the rest of India, the non-Brahmin movement.
Yes. While the Indian National Congress was fighting for broad national independence, the Justice Party emerged in the Madras presidency. They were arguing that simple independence from the British would just mean replacing British rule with upper caste Brahmin rule. They heavily championed affirmative action and social justice. This movement eventually evolved into the distinct Dravidian political identity, the DK and later the DMK parties.
Which brings us right to 1947, independence. But the map didn't say Tamil Nadu, did it? It said Madras State.
And Madras State was this sprawling administrative unit left over from the British era. It included parts of modern Andhra Pradesh and Kerala and Karnataka.
Then came 1956 and the States Reorganization Act. The borders of the country were redrawn along linguistic lines. The Telugu speakers got Andhra and the Malayali speakers got Kerala, but the Tamils were still left with the name Madras State.
And people were not happy about that at all. They wanted a name that reflected the deep ancient identity of the land. They wanted Tamil Nadu, the land of Tamils.
And this wasn't just a simple petition drive. A man actually died for this.
Venkara Linganar. He was a dedicated Gandhian. In 1956, he went on an indefinite hunger strike demanding the state be renamed. He fasted for 76 days.
76 days. That is just unimaginable resolve.
He died for the cause. His sacrifice completely galvanized the movement, but the government at the time dragged its feet. It wasn't until 1967, when the DMK swept to power under Chief Minister C.N. Annadurai, that the political will finally shifted.
And it passed the resolution in the assembly.
Yes, he did. And on January 14, 1969, Madras State officially became Tamil Nadu. It was a massive cultural victory.
There is a bit of a political scuffle about Tamil Nadu Day, though, right? When exactly do we celebrate it?
That's a very recent political debate. As impartial observers here, the sources lay out both sides clearly. The previous AIA-DMK government designated November 1st as the official day. That marks the 1956 border reorganization. But the current DMK administration shifted the celebration to July 18th.
Why July 18th specifically?
That is the exact date in 1967 when the resolution to rename the state was passed in the state assembly. Their argument is that November 1st is really just about administrative borders, and it actually reminds them of the territory they lost to other states like Tirupati. July 18th, on the other hand, celebrates the agency. the conscious political choice to reclaim the identity of Tamil Nadu.
Okay, so we have the identity, we have the deep history. Now let's talk about the wallet, the modern economy. We have the 2025-2026 Economic Survey of Tamil Nadu right here.
And it paints a picture of an absolute economic powerhouse. Tamil Nadu has about 6% of India's total population, but it contributes 9.4% to the national GDP.
That is punching significantly above your weight class.
It really is. And to just look at the per capita income, it is rupees 3.62 lakh. That is 1.77 times the national average. In much simpler terms, the average person in Tamil Nadu is nearly twice as wealthy as the average Indian citizen.
And the state government has set a massive target, haven't they? A $1 trillion economy.
By the fiscal year 2030 to 2031, it is a wildly ambitious goal. The Economic Survey notes that achieving this requires a sustained nominal growth of around 16%.
How are they planning to do that? What are the main engines of this growth?
Manufacturing is the huge one. Tamil Nadu is currently ranked #1 in manufacturing employment in all of India. It has always been the Detroit of India for automobile manufacturing, but now it is rapidly becoming a massive hub for advanced electronics. You have Foxconn and Tata Electronics and massive iPhone assembly lines setting up shop.
They are obviously attracting huge foreign direct investment, or FDI, then.
Over 3.6 billion US dollars in 2024 to 2025 alone. They are actively leveraging a highly skilled workforce, which actually circles right back to that social justice movement we talked about earlier. High literacy rates and very high female workforce participation. It is a very distinct model of inclusive economic growth.
But it's not all just smooth sailing, is it? The survey mentions some global headwinds.
Right, specifically international tariffs. The textile sector in Tirupur is globally massive. But the U.S. has imposed new tariffs on textiles, and overall global demand is slowing down. Inflation is another persistent concern, although the survey does note that Tamil Nadu's inflation is consistently lower than the national average.
So the trajectory is pretty clear, a rapid transition from a middle-income state to a high-income, knowledge-based economy.
Exactly, and when you step back and look at the whole picture, the arc is just breathtaking.
It really is. We started with a rough quartzite hand axe in Pallava. We went through the highly sophisticated urban planning of Kiladi. We saw the Sengal or the scepter concept in ancient Sangam literature, which, by the way, are ideas of governance that we still actively discuss today in India's new parliament.
We saw the cultural resilience against the Kalabhras and the architectural genius of the Pallavas. We saw the direct economic warfare of VOC fighting the British. It is all deeply connected.
And even those iron hooks and the megalithic burials at Adishanallur connecting directly to the devotee on the street performing kavadi today. It's that word again, continuity.
It's resilience and extreme adaptability. And I won't leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Go for it.
We talked about Kiladi and the graffiti script. If that link between the Indus Valley script and the Tamil Brahmi script found at Kiladi is definitively proven, just think about what that actually means for us.
It connects the two distant ends of ancient Indian history.
It means the second urbanization of India didn't just happen in the northern plains. It means the roots of urban literate civilization in the south are far deeper and far more connected to the Indus Valley than we ever dared to imagine. It fundamentally challenges the entire historiography of the subcontinent.
That is definitely a profound thought to chew on. History isn't just a list of dead dates. It is the active blueprint for where we are standing today.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Tamil Nadu. We'll see you next time.